Socrates comes across in this speech as an amiable old man. He's genial, he seems to have a sense of humor, he's well-meaning, he's well-spoken. He says repeatedly in the speech that he's not very eloquent, he's not a polished stylist and rhetorician, but when you actually look at the speech, it is in fact quite a sophisticated text, and the speech is not without its rhetorical flourishes and its stylistic fluency. So there's a bit of modesty too here that we see in the character of Socrates. One of the things that Socrates says in the speech is that he was a gadfly and that he went around the city of Athens talking to people, talking to Athenians, some of whom he knew, some might have been strangers, asking them questions. And it's possible that in the course of these activities and these encounters, he annoyed people. He was perhaps slightly provocative and was slightly perhaps rude to them, although he says he was more or less polite. But that's another side to his personality that we see in the Apology, that he went around town talking to people, asking them questions, challenging them, asking them whether they were living the best possible life, whether they were virtuous, whether they knew the meaning of virtue and the good, and so forth. So on the one hand, we have this presentation of him as a genial chap, someone you would enjoy talking to, someone who's modest, someone who's intellectual, interested in the world, but a person that, or rather I should say, and a person that you would want to spend some time talking to. On the other hand, we have this person who, in his own description, is someone who goes around the city buttonholing people, provoking them, goading them on, asking them difficult questions, perhaps making a nuisance of himself and annoying them. So there are these two sides to his personality that we see in the Apology. There's also other sides to Socrates that emerge in this speech. He says to us that he was lampooned by a playwright. We take this to be Aristophanes in the Clouds, which was produced in 423 or so. And Socrates, in the course of that revelation, makes it known to us that he was already a public figure in the city of Athens, and that people represented him on the stage, made fun of him, insulted him, and this seems to have been happening for some time already by the time we get to the Apology. Socrates was also associated with young men who were hostile to the democracy, or perceived as being hostile to the democracy. They were mainly aristocrats, they were wealthy, and they seemed to be anti-democratic. This was not a good time in Athens to be seen as anti-democratic. The Peloponnesian War had just come to an end. There were memories of Sparta, of the Spartan occupation of the Acropolis, and the lingering memories of the war, of the Spartans, of the anti-democratic forces would not have worked in Socrates' favor. And so this too was possibly a reason for the hostility towards Socrates. But this also tells us that if this representation is true in the Apology, that he had anti-democratic feelings. Now you want to be careful when we say that sort of thing, because we don't really know what Socrates himself felt. We have representations of Plato and Xenophon and others. and it's difficult to interpret these texts. The Republic is sometimes interpreted as an anti-democratic text. It's sometimes said to be modeled on Sparta and the Spartan political system. And if that's the case, then Socrates is suggesting that the Athenians ought to be looking towards Sparta as a potential political model, not towards the democracy that they themselves have in Athens, but they should be looking towards Sparta. So the anti-democratic affiliation that Socrates seems to have, the possibly pro-Spartan affinities again, might have worked against him. And these are all things that emerge during the apology. It's not something that he's necessarily concealing, but he's suggesting these facets to his personality. He's revealing these things to us about his political proclivities and his inclinations to us in the apology.